So anyways, I'm down here below the old iron bridge in Corio County in Gatesville. It's pretty chilly outside for Texas. And I'm sitting under the bridge like a grumpy old troll, contemplating life and praying to God, because even in my own home I can't seem to find peace there. And I'm contemplating, and don't worry, this isn't going to be one of those down by the river incidents, you know. I'm not suicidal, although I am deeply, deeply sad. I go away and I become alone to get away from sadness, to view life outside of all the busy things that are going on, whether it's in the city or at home with the family. And the greatest problem, the greatest hindrance in my relationship with Jesus Christ has been, well, I'll just straight up say it's been lust. For a lot of people, it's the same thing. People struggle with pornography addictions. People that are much prettier than myself struggle with sex addictions. And I've noticed that no matter how much I tried to be freed from that, my flesh was always my enemy. And no matter how much I fought against it, both Satan, acting as an outside agent, bringing troubles and trials and tribulations suddenly into my life, as well as my flesh, worked in concert together to ensure that I was not freed from my stronghold. And I was thinking to myself how it seems like no matter how much I try to fight against the current keeps taking me downstream. And I started contemplating on that, and I looked here at the Leon River, as you can see. And I was contemplating to myself, why can't I be free from this? And I was reminded of an old Southern idiom, or a saying, and that is, it is better to direct your path traveling with the current than to fight against it. That is to say, if life is taking you somewhere, to just make sure that you reach the best possible outcome with the circumstances that you have, rather than shaking your fist against the sky and trying to fight it. And that saying would seem wise, but it doesn't always apply to the situations at hand. Such as my situation, where I absolutely need to be free as a part of my sanctification and salvation. And so I got to contemplating that, and I started looking at these rocks. And, the water here, I don't know if you can see it, but there should be some rocks there submerged, but the water level has dropped to the point to where the top of the rock, which is a deep gray color, is not only protruding from the water, but completely dry. And I noticed, I started watching the ripples. Let's see if you can see it here. Yeah, just those tiny little rocks right there. They're actually not tiny, they're larger than basketballs, but they are a good 30 to 50 feet away. In any case, I was watching the ripples, and the reason why the tops of the rocks are dry is because the water level is so low that the water's breaking against the rock, because the rock refuses to be carried downstream and the rock refuses to be moved. And I was reminded of a saying of Jesus Christ where he told a parable of building a house on the sand and building a house on a foundation of rock. And that when the storms came and the winds blew, the person whose home was built on the rock withstood it, whereas in the person whose house was built on sand, on shifting sand, their home was destroyed. Essentially, the sand shifted, the balance and everything that the house needed to stand was thrown out of whack, and the house came tumbling down. And I got to thinking about how this rock is not being carried by the current of the water, but refuses to be moved. And the only reason that I can even see this rock is because the water level has decreased to the point that it can be visible. This whole time, I've never known that rock was there. It's usually only during the winter when there's no rain when that rock is visible. And that kind of reminded me of the only time that we can ever see the rock in our lives is when there's a peaceful calm in our life, when bad things aren't happening to us. But when bad things happen and the waters rise, it's difficult to see that rock. When bad things happen in our lives, and the flood waters rise in our own lives, just like Peter who was walking on the water, it seems like I get distracted. That the whole point of these things coming into my life is to distract me and to get me to take my eyes off of that rock, to get me to take my feet off of that rock. And that rock is Jesus Christ. Because when these things happen, they happen terribly. They happen all of a sudden and all at once. Whether that be last December when not only did my son almost die of sepsis, but my wife, when Alex had ripped his IV, my son had ripped his IV cord line out of his arm, which caused the sepsis in the first place because he was hospitalized for the flu to begin with. I noticed that, she said a curse word because she was shocked. There was blood squirting. And the hospital employees who were inspired by Satan went ahead and called Child Protective Services on us because even saying the S word or the F word in the presence of a child and within earshot of the nurses, the Scott and White Hospital in Temple, their policy is to have all of their employees immediately call CPS and report abuse, which was absolutely terrible. And that was a whole convoluted mess, but it was to say that the hospital directed its employees to make a slew of false accusations against my wife and I of abuse against the child in the hospital, which were ultimately proven innocent by the hospital's own video camera footage. And the CPS worker even thought it was ridiculous, and rather than trusting in God, I got angry at the hospital workers because they weren't properly taking care of my son, who had arrived on ambulance because he hadn't had water in 2 days. And they threw him out of the triage room and made him wait in the emergency room for the next 6 hours. All the while, he continued to remain vomiting and eyes rolling in the back of my head, and I was angry. Instead of praying that God take vengeance for me, I called and filed a complaint with the state of Texas for medical neglect in an ER. And the hospital found out about it because I called the hospital's complaint line, and I bragged about how I called and filed a complaint because I wanted them to know that I had gotten revenge for them not taking care of my kid. And, they had definitely done wrong. But because they knew I had filed the report, because I had bragged about it, because of my hubris, because I didn't pray to God, I didn't rely on Him to to work on my behalf during this time. They, upper management of the hospital, directed some of the lower hospital staff to basically back them up in their false claims that they made against my family. And so, instead of trusting in God to take care of the situation and to deal with people appropriately, I took matters into my own hands. I took my feet off of that rock, and when the storms came tumbling down, the circumstances surrounding me led me back into an even worse situation than where I was previously. Previously, I was ready to be free from sexual immorality. Then, when the floodwaters came, I was washed right off that rock because I took my feet off, and you know, I'm still in bondage over it. And so if anybody can learn this little life lesson from me and get some building up from this, just thank God on my behalf, and thank God that He revealed this to me, because it's given me somewhere to work. It's giving me because previously I was lost in the freaking wilderness. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to recover myself from here. But now I realize that I don't need to recover myself. I need to put my feet back on that rock and trust in Him to take care of these things for me. Now, that's not to say that there's not going to be some effort on my part. But most of that effort is going to be standing firm against the waters, standing firm against those waters, and not moving. And Jesus will do everything else.